I'm Huon Hooke, and this is The Real Review. The wine we're tasting now is Angullong Fossil Hill Sangiovese Rosé 2019, and this comes from the Orange region. So the backstory to Angullong is quite a long and interesting one. This property, which is near Orange in central western New South Wales, has been a sheep and lamb and wool growing property since the early 1900s, so a long time. In the 1920s it was shearing 10,000 sheep, which is a lot of sheep. The Crossing family have been the owners since 1950, and they're still the current owners. They produce cattle for most of that time, and since 1998 they've had a vineyard there. So the vines came quite late to this property, but since then they've achieved quite a lot with their vineyard. They produce some terrific wines from a wide range of grape varieties, and they sell them at very, very acceptable prices. They've also added cellar door sales. Because they're a bit out of the way, they've chosen a place which is not on their property for their cellar door sales. It's in a little town called Millthorpe, which is on the Sydney Road, and it's an old bluestone stables, I think it is, horse stables, which they've converted into cellar door sales in the village of Millthorpe, and it's really quite smart. The vineyard itself is at the altitude of 600 metres, which makes it not one of the highest vineyards in Orange. The vineyards in Orange go up as high as 1,000 metres in altitude. So it's one of the warmest sites, so that means that they can ripen the red grapes, Cabernet, Shiraz, and some of the red Italian grapes like Sangiovese, like Barbera, quite easily there without any trouble at all. And they do make all of those wines, make them very well indeed. The consultant winemaker is, Ben Crossing himself is the winemaker, but John Reynolds, who is a well-known, long-established winemaker all around New South Wales, is the overall kind of guy who looks after it. So the variety for this wine is Sangiovese. And you might think, well, that's not a very common variety for making rosé in Australia, but in fact it's becoming more common. Sangiovese is a very adaptable grape. Normally it's used to make a red wine, a full-bodied red wine, and of course the home of Sangiovese is Tuscany in central Italy, but Sangiovese is grown all over Italy pretty much, and in many different provinces of Italy, produces a lot of fantastic wine in that country. In fact, Sangiovese is the most widely planted grape variety in all of Italy. So rosé, yes, why not? In Italy they would call it a rosato. The Crossing family don't have Italian in their background as far as I'm aware, but they seem to have decided that Italian varieties are an important part of what they're offering from Angullong. Why is it called Fossil Hill? Well, because the area is rich in fossils. There is limestone, subsoil, and there's even the Age of Fishes Museum out at Canowindra, which is not very far from Orange, which is a great place to go if you're interested in the history of that sort of thing. But what does this wine taste like? Well, here we go. The first thing you notice is that it's a very light colour, and this is very fashionable. Rosé of a pale colour is very much in vogue at the moment. When I started out in the wine business, rosé was always much darker than that, much darker. But this is more of a Provence-style rosé, Provence in the south of France, where rosé is always very pale coloured. It's sort of a light coral pink colour. It's a very beautiful colour, a slight tinge of salmon pink to it, starting to develop a little bit. Swirl it in the glass and have a sniff. And it's very much a fruit-driven wine. It's not particularly complex. It's a lot of fruit in there. There's cherries, there's strawberries, maybe a touch of rhubarb. Really quite attractive, a hint of spice. But I suspect it hasn't been fermented in wood, it hasn't been aged in barrels at all. So it's very much the fruit talking. It's the Sangiovese grape variety that's talking. Let's have a taste. Pretty delicious, very dry, very appetizing. Lots of acid, but not too much. Good refreshing acidity on the finish. A little tickle of tannin there, giving you some grip, which will help it go with food. It's a really good food wine. Really good food wine because it's dry and it has plenty of acid and has a touch of grip to it, a bit of tannin on the finish. And again, you get those cherry and raspberry flavours. A really, really good wine. I'm reminded that it won a gold medal at the Orange Wine Show as well. So yes, it's an excellent wine. How do we rate this wine? Well, we rate it at 95, which is really high score for a rosé. We don't see an awful lot of rosés that get up into the gold medal territory, but that one did. It's rated number 1 out of 27 Sangioveses from across the country that we tasted from the 2019 vintage, and it's a top ranked wine. And we suggest that you drink it from now until 2 or 3 years. It won't fade too quickly, but in my opinion, rosé is nearly always best drunk as young as possible. $26, really good price. What would you drink this with, this dry Provence-style rosé made of Sangiovese? We asked the winemaker Ben Crossing what he would recommend serving with this kind of wine, and he said barbecued prawns. Well, that's an easy one. I reckon just about anything goes with barbecued prawns, but this wine certainly would be superb with barbecued prawns. I can't wait. Good health.